Imagine a massive global corporation. It's June 1st.
Right, the start of Pride Month.
Exactly. And across all of their social media platforms, the corporate logo just crossfades into a vibrant rainbow flag.
Yeah, the classic rebrand.
Right. And they publish these beautifully worded press releases about love and inclusion and standing shoulder to shoulder with the marginalized.
And I'm sure their engagement metrics are just going through the roof.
Oh, completely off the charts. But, and here's the catch on, that exact same afternoon, hidden deep in their public financial disclosures, that very same corporation is wiring millions of dollars to political action committees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, committees that are actively writing legislation to strip away rights from the exact community they are supposedly celebrating online.
That's incredibly jarring.
It is. So the question is that just a cynical marketing department missing the mark? Or are we looking at a symptom of a much, much deeper structural glitch in how human beings and the entities we create signal our morality?
It is really the defining paradox of our modern communication infrastructure.
Yeah, it really is.
If you look at the visual landscape of the internet, if you can picture a backdrop behind me of a sprawling digital cityscape, right?
I'm picturing it.
Imagine a skyline built entirely out of glowing hashtags and rapidly scrolling feeds and neon protest signs.
Like Times Square, but just pure anxiety.
Exactly. You see a space that is incredibly chaotic, brightly colored, and completely saturated with moral judgment. We've essentially built an ecosystem that actively demands we project our internal values outward. Constantly.
And that demand for constant projection is exactly why we are here today.
Right.
Welcome to this deep dive. And to you, the listener plugging in right now, you're here because you are the learner.
You're trying to make sense of all this.
Yeah, you're trying to navigate this glowing, screaming cityscape. You want to understand the architecture of this digital noise without being, completely overwhelmed by it.
Which is a tall order these days.
It really is. So today, we are opening up a massive stack of source material. We've got academic audits involving tens of thousands of data points.
We have philosophical essays dissecting the very nature of virtue.
Right, and journalistic investigations into corporate boardrooms, plus some really deep-seated evolutionary psychology.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. Our mission is to take a scalpel to the entire concept of social media activism. We're going to objectively dissect what happens when we post our morals online.
And just to be clear up front, we are looking at behavior spanning the entire political spectrum.
Yes, strictly neutral, no taking sides here.
Right, we're just analyzing the mechanics of it to answer one massive question. Is this all just a toxic, ego-driven performance? Or is there a hidden, tangible engine of societal value buried in all that noise?
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to do that effectively, we have to start by establishing a very precise taxonomy.
Like defining our terms.
Exactly. We can't analyze the behavior of billions of interconnected humans if we don't have a shared vocabulary for the variations of that behavior.
Makes sense. Where do we start?
There's a deeply reported piece from Vice that gives us a really good framework to categorize these digital actions. And it starts with the most ubiquitous one, Slacktivism.
Slacktivism. A portmanteau of slacker and activism.
You got it. The defining mechanism of Slacktivism isn't just that it happens online, it's the ratio of effort to reward.
Okay, break that down for me.
It's a token gesture. Liking a post, automatically signing an online petition through one of those pre-filled forms, retweeting a trending topic.
Basically things you can do from your phone while waiting in line for coffee?
Exactly. It requires absolutely zero willingness to incur any personal cost. There's no financial sacrifice, no sacrifice of time, and crucially, no risk to your social standing.
Because everyone else is doing it too. The psychological mechanism there is fascinating. It's essentially a closed dopamine loop, isn't it?
Oh, entirely. You engage in this frictionless, low-cost behavior, and your brain immediately rewards you.
You get that neurochemical hit of feeling like a productive member of a global community.
Without actually producing anything.
Right. You get the emotional satisfaction of having, quote-unquote, helped without ever having to get off the couch or confront a difficult reality.
But the sources point to a variation of this that is significantly more deceptive.
Okay, what's that?
False signaling.
Oh, false signaling. Let me put an analogy to this. It's like the person who loudly and publicly chastises their friends for using plastic straws because they want to save the oceans.
Oh, I know this person.
Yeah, but then they routinely drive their car to an illegal dumping ground at midnight to throw away their old tires.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And Harvard Business School research, specifically the work by Gillian Jordan, isolates this exact dynamic.
So it's studied at an Ivy League level?
Yeah. False signaling goes beyond just being lazy. It is an act of deception.
It's premeditated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It occurs when an individual deliberately broadcasts a signal to convince their social group that they possess a positive moral trait that they empirically lack.
So they're lying to look good.
Yes. And the digital space is uniquely vulnerable to this because the physical constraints of reality are just removed.
Right, because if we lived in a physical village, your reputation would be tethered to your physical actions. People would see you throwing away those tires.
Exactly. But online, your avatar can project a completely synthetic morality. It's entirely decoupled from how you treat, say, the barista at your local coffee shop.
Which leads directly into a really dangerous psychological trap outlined in the Inclusion Nudges text. They call it moral licensing.
Moral licensing, it's fascinating.
It really is. It's where the brain essentially gamifies our ethics. It treats morality like a bank account.
The moral bank account is such a perfect way to visualize it. Moral licensing is a deeply documented cognitive bias.
How does the bank account work in practice?
So when a person performs one incredibly minor, supposedly good deed like posting a supportive hashtag or changing their profile picture to match a cause, they make a deposit into that internal moral bank account.
Okay, so they feel rich in morality.
Right. Because they've publicly established this act of goodness, their brain grants them a moral free pass.
The internal narrative shifts to, I have proven I am one of the good people.
Yes. And the danger there is paralyzing.
Because once you convince yourself you've earned the good person badge through a digital post, the motivation to do the grueling, unglamorous physical work just sort of evaporates.
It does. But the Inclusion Nudges research reveals a consequence that is even darker than mere paralysis.
Darker how?
This mechanism of moral licensing can actively trigger and shield unconscious discriminatory judgments.
Wait, really? It causes discrimination?
Yes. The individual becomes so thoroughly convinced of their conscious good intentions, so insulated by their digital performance of allyship, that they become entirely blind to their own subsequent biased behaviors in the real world.
Wow. So their conscious belief in their own virtue contradicts their unconscious actions.
Creating a massive, invisible gap in their integrity.
I mean, you see this in corporate settings all the time. Someone might champion workplace diversity online, but genuinely fail to notice when they consistently talk over their marginalized colleagues in a meeting.
Because they've already decided they are an ally.
They check the box.
Exactly.
To really see the explosive collision of slacktivism, false signaling, and moral licensing on a massive global scale, we have to look at the ubiquitous case study cited across almost all of our sources.
You're talking about the events of June 2nd, 2020.
I am. The Catalyst report, the Snopes investigations, the Vice EE article, the Emory Journal, they all anchor their analysis on that single 24-hour period, Blackout Tuesday.
It remains the most concentrated, macroscopic example of performative allyship in the history of the internet.
Think about where you were that day. You open Instagram, which is an application algorithmically designed to feed you vibrant colors, faces, lifestyle aesthetics.
It's all visual candy.
Right. And suddenly the entire visual landscape is completely obliterated. The feed just went dark.
Millions upon millions of solid black squares.
All tagged with the hashtag Blackout Tuesday, scrolling infinitely.
And the context of that specific moment is critical. The world was experiencing the height of the global protests against police violence.
Right, following the murder of George Floyd.
But the original intent behind those black squares actually originated within the music industry.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was designed as a targeted internal pause. A day to halt business as usual, stop self-promotion, and force music executives to reflect on how much profit they extract from black talent.
That's actually a really powerful, specific action. But the moment that targeted industry initiative escaped into the general public, it mutated.
Completely mutated. The original intent was stripped away and it became the ultimate low-risk, high-reward status symbol.
And we saw an algorithmic disaster unfold in real
A
time.
literal disaster.
Because people were utilizing the primary hashtags associated with the ongoing street protests. So the sheer volume of these empty black squares effectively launched a denial of service attack on the movement's own communication infrastructure.
That's the part that is so hard to swallow. Organizers on the ground were desperately trying to use those specific hashtags to broadcast crucial survival information.
Like the locations of riot police, safe routes for protesters, supplies of medical aid.
Numbers for legal representation. All of that vital, life-saving data was instantly buried under a digital avalanche of performative silence.
It's the ultimate tragic irony. People wanted to show solidarity, but their method of showing solidarity actively blinded the people they were trying to help.
Organizers were literally begging people to delete the squares.
And when you analyze it through the framework we just established, it was pure slacktivism driven by immense social pressure.
Users looked left and right, saw their entire digital cohort posting the square, and just panicked.
Right, posting it became a defensive mechanism. They wanted to claim the moral high ground and avoid being targeted by the digital mob, all without having to engage in any actual anti-racist labor.
The Emory Journal piece highlights this perfectly by bringing in the philosophy of the author Ibram X. Kendi.
Okay, what's his take on it?
Kendi argues that there is no such thing as passive neutrality in a structurally unequal society.
You can't just sit on the fence.
Exactly. He makes a stark distinction between the claim of being, quote, not racist, which is a passive stance of merely wanting to avoid guilt, and the active, ongoing, often difficult work of being anti-racist.
Which requires actively dismantling those inequalities.
Right. The black square functioned as the ultimate shield of the not racist.
Ah, I see.
It was a way to publicly declare, I am not the problem, thereby absolving the user of any responsibility to actually become part of the solution.
Okay, I hear that, but I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go ahead.
Let's look at the sheer physics of attention here. Even if those black squares disrupted communication, even if 90% of the people posting them were operating out of pure ego and lazy slacktivism.
Which many were.
True, but we are talking about millions of human beings who had previously spent their lives actively ignoring systemic inequality, suddenly broadcasting it.
That's a fair point.
Doesn't that unprecedented volume of raw awareness possess a tangible value? I mean, isn't a flawed, annoying signal still infinitely better than total silence?
This raises an important question. And honestly, it is the exact tension at the heart of this entire debate.
Does the awareness outweigh the annoyance?
Basically, yes.
Right.
Does the massive, clumsy scale of low-effort signaling ultimately force a society to shift its Overton window?
Right.
We are absolutely going to dive into the empirical data that supports your point later on.
Okay, good, because I think there's real meat there.
There is. The surprising benefits of that awareness are very real. But before we can accurately measure the societal benefit, we have to thoroughly examine the individual psychological damage.
You have to look under the hood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to understand the underlying engine driving this behavior. Why is the human ego so desperately, ravenously hungry for these digital rewards?
Okay, well, here's where it gets really interesting. We know the behavior is low risk and high reward. Let's look at the engine of that reward. Let's do it. Let's explore the mechanics of the ego, the weaponization of outrage, and the psychological architecture of the echo chambers we willingly build around ourselves.
For that, we turn to a brilliant philosophical anchor from an essay by John Lippitt in Comet magazine.
What does Lippitt say?
He looks past the modern technology and finds the exact same psychological pattern documented thousands of years ago in the biblical parable of the Pharisee.
Because human nature doesn't change, only the bandwidth does.
That is exactly it. The Pharisee in the Gospel of Luke is essentially the ancient prototype of the modern influencer.
Oh, that's a great way to frame it.
He is a religious leader who goes into the temple, the public square of his time, not to seek actual spiritual growth, but to broadcast his own superiority.
His prayer is entirely outward-facing.
Right. He stands up and declares, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector.
And then he painstakingly lists his own virtuous metrics. He details his fasting and his tithing.
He's checking his own engagement stats in the middle of a prayer.
That's so accurate. The profound vice Lippitt identifies here isn't just arrogance, though, is it?
No, it is the specific mechanism of self-righteousness. It is the sin of pride taking root by establishing a comparative baseline.
The comparison is the key.
Exactly. The Pharisee's sense of moral purity only exists in contrast to the perceived impurity of the outgroup, the tax collector.
So he grants himself the perceived standing to judge the quote-unquote lesser person.
And in doing so, elevates his own social status within his in-group.
The irony is blinding when you map this onto our current digital behavior.
It mapped perfectly.
Lippitt's thesis is that social media platforms are functionally designed to be massive, global temples filled with millions of Pharisees, all shouting their prayers over each other.
We log onto our accounts, and the subtext of almost every political post is, "Thank God I'm not like those people."
And depending entirely on which algorithmic echo chamber the user inhabits, those people are whoever the tribe has designated as the enemy.
The sources provide specific examples of this, noting how the framing is utilized across the ideological spectrum.
Like what?
Well, a user might post a furious denunciation to signal, "Thank God I am not a Trump supporter," or conversely, "Thank God I am not part of the liberal elite."
Or in the UK context, thank God I'm not a Brexiteer.
Exactly. And maintaining our strict neutrality here, the crucial takeaway is not the specific political target being denounced.
Right, it's not about which side is right.
The structural reality is that the mechanism of denunciation is identical. It is the tactical deployment of outrage to establish moral superiority by pointing a finger at a designated outgroup.
And when you incentivize that denunciation with likes and retweets, you create a monster.
You really do.
That brings us to the work of philosophers Justin Tosi and Brandon Wormkem. They have codified this behavior into a concept they call moral grandstanding.
This isn't just about sharing an opinion.
No, it's the specific abuse of moral discourse to jockey for social status, and they break this down into 5 distinct, observable features.
When we outline these, I guarantee you will see the architecture of every viral argument you've ever witnessed online.
Oh, absolutely. Walk us through them. What's the first feature?
The first feature is piling on.
Piling on.
This occurs when a user adds their voice to a massive chorus of pre-existing outrage, fully aware that they are contributing absolutely nothing new or substantive to the discourse.
They aren't offering a solution or a novel perspective.
No. They are simply registering their presence. It is a roll call.
So they're just ensuring their peers see them participating so they aren't accused of complicity by silence.
Precisely.
I see this constantly. It's the digital equivalent of standing in an angry mob and throwing a single pebble just to prove to the mob that you are on their side.
That's a great visual. But the psychology dictates that simply throwing the pebble isn't enough, which leads to the second feature, ramping up.
Ramping up. This is the escalation protocol.
Yes. Once a certain level of outrage has been established by the group, merely agreeing with that baseline is no longer sufficient to earn social status.
You have to prove that your moral compass is even more finely tuned than the person who posted before you.
Exactly. It creates an arms race of unforgiveness.
Let me give you an example. If someone makes a poor joke online and user A says they should lose their job.
User B can't just agree.
Right. To win the interaction, user B has to declare that the person shouldn't just be fired. They should be permanently exiled from their industry.
And user C has to demand their life be ruined entirely.
It's a competition to see who can be the most unyielding because nuance is viewed as weakness.
Which seamlessly triggers the third feature, trumping up.
Trumping up. What is that?
This is the tactical inflation of harm. It involves claiming a profound moral offense has occurred in situations where the actual slight is incredibly minor.
Or stretching the definition of trauma to encompass everyday friction.
Right. By detecting microscopic offenses that others miss, the grandstander signals to the in-group that they possess a hypervigilant, superior moral radar.
And the physical manifestation of that hypervigilance is the fourth feature, excessive outrage.
Yes. The sources reference philosophers C. Grian and Becca Williams, who coined a terrifyingly accurate phrase for this, moral outrage porn.
Moral outrage porn. That is bleak.
It is. It is the deliberate faking or extreme amplification of emotional distress as a proxy for deep conviction.
So the user expresses a level of fury or shock or devastation that is completely disproportionate to the event.
They do this not because they are genuinely moved to physical action, but because the mere display of the extreme emotion is internally gratifying.
And socially rewarded.
The performance of the anger becomes the product itself.
The exhaustion of navigating that is intense. But the fifth and final feature is arguably the most destructive to a functioning society.
Claiming a self-evident truth.
Yes, this is the arrogant, high-handed dismissal of incredibly complex, multi-layered sociological issues as being entirely black and white.
The sources outline how this operates as the thought-terminating cliché. It deliberately flattens nuance to prevent debate.
Right, because debate requires effort.
Exactly. For example, if an individual attempts to engage in a nuanced discussion regarding the complex legal and biological intersections of transgender rights and women's spaces.
Referencing the highly charged debates surrounding public figures like J.K. Rowling.
Yes, the grandstander will refuse to engage with the actual arguments. Instead, they will declare the entire topic a self-evident truth, dismissing any questioning as pure, unadulterated bigotry.
And we see the exact same mechanism deployed from other ideological camps too.
Oh, everywhere.
If an employee wants to critically discuss the actual effectiveness or perhaps the heavy-handed execution of a corporate workplace diversity and inclusion program,
the grandstander will instantly dismiss them as a reactionary foot soldier of woke tyranny.
Right. The goal is never to persuade. The goal is to declare that your own position is so morally obvious that anyone who disagrees is fundamentally corrupt and unworthy of conversation.
This aggressive flattening of nuance is actually being supercharged by the visual evolution of social media platforms. The medium itself is shaping the message.
That's so true.
We have insightful pieces from the Aggie and a deeply analytical essay by Pomona College student Sumi Vora that investigate the rise of what we can call bait infographics.
Oh, the bait infographics. If you spend any time on Instagram, you are intimately familiar with this aesthetic.
We are talking about the 10-slide Instagram carousel.
They are visually stunning. They use these soothing pastel color palettes, soft pinks, mint greens.
Elegant serif typography, perhaps some hand-drawn floral borders.
Exactly, and they use this incredibly calming aesthetic to explain phenomenally dense, historically bloody topics.
Like critical race theory or the geopolitical intricacies of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
And all in about 150 words per slide.
Vora's essay pinpoints the cognitive dissonance of this format. It is the ultimate aestheticization of activism.
It really is. It takes generational trauma, complex bodies of sociological research, intricate geopolitical warfare, and violently compresses them into easily digestible, highly shareable morsels of lifestyle content.
And while proponents argue they lower the barrier to entry for political education,
Which, okay, maybe they do a little.
they are fundamentally dangerously reductionist.
But the truly insidious part, the part that directly hacks the human ego, is the language embedded in these graphics. They are designed as psychological traps.
Have you seen the ones with explicit commands?
Yes. I have seen beautifully designed, soft pink posts that explicitly command the viewer. Repost this to your story if you are against sexual assault.
The framing there is astonishingly manipulative. It presents a false binary wrapped in a moral threat.
Exactly. Think about the mechanics of that. That post has absolutely zero functional utility.
It doesn't raise funds for victims.
It doesn't lobby lawmakers. It doesn't change a single physical reality. It is a direct, calculated threat to the user's reputation.
It forces the viewer to confront a terrifying question.
If I simply scroll past this without putting it on my public story, will the algorithm tell my followers?
Will my peers notice my absence?
Will my friends assume I am secretly pro-assault? It weaponizes the fear of ostracization, forcing you to virtue signal just to protect your digital avatar from the mob.
That underlying chronic fear of ostracization leads us perfectly into a brilliant conceptual framework built by David Neal.
This is from his piece for 8th Mile, right?
Yes. Neal argues that our digital society is no longer governed by shared values or genuine conviction. It is increasingly governed by sheer terror.
Terror.
He outlines the tragedy of what he calls the Camp C dilemma.
Walk us through the architecture of these camps. How does this play out when a controversy actually drops?
So whenever a cultural flashpoint erupts online, a scandal, a political statement, a controversial video, the immediate social reaction forces the entire digital populace to rapidly sort themselves.
You were violently pressured to join Camp A or Camp B.
And the inescapable logic of internet tribalism dictates a zero-sum game. If you are in Camp A, you must categorically despise every single human being in Camp B.
And vice versa, there is no middle ground.
It is the distillation of pure tribal warfare.
But where does Camp C fit into this?
Camp C is where intellectual honesty goes to die. Camp C is comprised of the people who look at the unfolding controversy, recognize the chaos, and say, I don't know yet. The situation appears incredibly complex, the facts are still emerging, and I need more context before I pass a permanent moral judgment.
Which, in a rational physical world, that is the most mature, responsible position a human being can take.
In the physical world, yes, but within the hyper-accelerated digital ecosystem, Camp C becomes the ultimate unforgivable enemy to both Camp A and Camp B.
The nuance of requiring context is actively punished.
We see phrases like, silence is violence weaponized to eradicate Camp C.
Not having an immediate, loudly broadcasted, easily categorizable opinion is deemed far more treacherous than picking the opposing side.
Because the person in Camp C refuses to validate the outrage machine.
The psychological toll of that is massive. People are terrified. Think about your own feed. How many times have you picked a side prematurely?
Or reposted one of those pastel infographics.
Right. Not because you deeply researched the issue and felt a burning conviction, but purely out of a biological survival instinct.
You join a camp just to escape the crushing social pressure.
And to ensure you aren't the one left standing alone when the mob starts looking for a target.
So, we have thoroughly established how this operates on an individual, psychological level.
How fear, ego, and the desperate biological need to remain safely inside the in-group drives our digital behavior.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to scale this analysis up.
We need to examine what happens when these exact same digital signals are deployed not by terrified individuals, but by massive, calculated entities.
And the signals completely fail to match physical reality.
This is where we cross from individual psychology into the hypocrisy gap.
Let's elevate this from the anxiety of the individual user to the cold calculus of the corporate boardroom. Let's talk about corporate performative allyship.
A scale of corporate hypocrisy documented in our sources is just staggering.
When we synthesize the findings from the Catalyst report with the deep investigative journalism of the Aragon Outlook, we see something alarming.
We see how the individual desire for moral signaling has been systematically weaponized into a multi-billion-dollar public relations strategy.
It is the absolute peak of capitalist absurdity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's go back to the scenario we opened the show with. Every single June, like clockwork for Pride Month, the global corporate machine shifts gears.
Massive conglomerates change their social media avatars to incorporate the rainbow flag.
They saturate their feeds with heavily produced videos celebrating love, diversity, and the LGBTQ+ community.
But the Aragon Outlook piece pulls the financial records.
And what do they find?
They point out that at the exact same moment, these companies, and they specifically name Amazon, Home Depot, and AT&T, are flying the digital rainbow flag and harvesting the social capital of being an inclusive brand.
Their political action committees are quietly funneling millions of dollars to lawmakers who are actively writing and passing anti-LGBTQ+ legislation.
It is the macro-level execution of false signaling. It's a calculated arbitrage.
They are attempting to extract the maximum brand loyalty and consumer revenue from progressive audiences online,
while simultaneously financing the restriction of those audiences' rights in the physical world to secure favorable corporate tax rates or deregulation.
It's just wild. And it isn't just limited to social justice. The hypocrisy gap is massive in environmentalism, too.
Oh, absolutely.
The Aragon investigation highlights a fascinating, highly visual example involving Kim Kardashian's apparel brand, Skims.
The climate change bra.
Yes. They launched a massive, highly publicized marketing campaign centered around a climate change nipple bra. The entire aesthetic of the campaign, the copy, the imagery, it was all aggressively coded to signal environmental stewardship.
Fighting global warming, caring for the planet.
But when you strip away the marketing aesthetic and look at the physical supply chain, the reality completely collapses.
The independent sustainability rating organization, Good on You, which rigorously evaluates brands on their ecological impact, labor conditions, and resource management, gave Skims their lowest possible rating.
It is entirely a theatrical performance. It is the aesthetic of desperate grassroots activism being used as a mask for aggressive, hyper-polluting capitalist consumption.
You are literally buying a plastic product to feel good about the environment.
To help consumers navigate this hall of mirrors, the Catalyst organization has developed a diagnostic tool.
They outline 3 major empirical signs of corporate performative allyship.
So if a listener wants to cut through a brand's PR spin, look for these three structural realities. What's number one?
Number one, a glaring lack of diversity at the very top of the power structure.
The C-suite.
Right. A corporation can post Black Lives Matter statements and hire diverse actors for their commercials all day long, but if their C-suite executives and board of directors remain entirely homogenous, the public statement is mathematically empty.
The translation is basically, we value diversity immensely for our marketing materials, just not enough to actually share any structural power or equity.
Exactly. Number two goes deeper into the data. It's the refusal to track or transparently discuss intersectional data metrics.
What does that look like?
It is very easy for a CEO to stand on a stage and say, we empower women. But when you ask them for the specific promotion rates, retention rates, and pay parity data for women of color, or women with disabilities, or LGBTQ plus women within their ranks,
They suddenly claim that data is internal and confidential.
if they hide the intersectional data, they are hiding the structural reality,
And the third sign?
making grand, sweeping public pronouncements without establishing any structural mechanism for follow-through.
So all talk, no action.
It's the company that loudly claims to foster a safe space for marginalized employees, but continually passes those same employees over for leadership roles.
Or quietly settles lawsuits regarding toxic workplace cultures via non-disclosure agreements while maintaining their pristine public image. This raises a massive logistical problem. How do we, as individual consumers, actually hold these massive entities accountable when their PR budgets are larger than the GDP of small nations?
The fact-checking site Snopes actually provides a fascinating methodology here.
We think of Snopes as the people who debunk fake news about UFOs or political quotes.
But they have actively evolved to monitor and debunk corporate virtue signaling. Their approach is highly forensic.
So when a major brand posts a statement of solidarity regarding a current event, the Snopes analysts run it through a three-part filter.
First, they conduct a historical audit, checking the brand's long-term history of actions and political donations to see if it actually aligns with the sudden online persona.
Exactly like the Aragon investigation into the rainbow logos. What's the second filter?
They look for the monetary incentive.
Yeah.
They analyze whether this supposed post of heartfelt solidarity is actually just a thinly veiled, opportunistic advertisement.
Is the message of support inextricably tied to the marketing of a specific good or service?
Are they trying to monetize the cultural grief or outrage?
And the third filter is the one that always makes my skin crawl. They perform a linguistic analysis of the statement to detect self-promotion.
It's a subtle grammatical difference.
Right. It's the difference between a company saying, today we honor and celebrate Black History Month, versus a company releasing a statement saying, as a globally recognized leader in diversity, equity, and groundbreaking innovation, we are incredibly proud to celebrate Black History Month.
The distinction is vital. The latter statement aggressively centers the corporation itself as the hero in the narrative of the marginalized group.
It is the literal co-opting of a social movement to polish a corporate resume.
It's infuriating. But while it is incredibly satisfying to point fingers at the hypocrisy of Fortune 500 companies and billionaires,
Oh, it's very satisfying.
the sources force us to undergo a much more uncomfortable exercise. We have to take this massive macroeconomic critique and scale it all the way back down to our own living rooms.
Yeah, this part hit home for me. There is a profoundly challenging perspective offered by Kathy Kasani Adams, a therapist who specializes in family dynamics and parenting.
Adams strips away all the digital metrics and focuses on the most unsparing hyperlocal audience a person can have.
Their own children.
She points out a brutal truth. Your children do not care about the virtuous, profound quotes you post on Facebook.
They are entirely unimpressed by the socially conscious Bible verse you curated for your Instagram bio.
They do not care about the perfectly lit photograph you posted of that dense, anti-racist book resting aesthetically next to your morning matcha latte.
They don't care because kids possess the ultimate biologically hardwired radar for hypocrisy.
They aren't reading your posts, they are watching your physical body.
They watch how you behave when the smartphone camera is turned off and there is no audience to applaud you.
They watch how you manage your tone of voice when you speak to your spouse after a deeply exhausting day at work.
They watch to see if you actually share the grueling, invisible household chores equally, or if you just post articles praising gender equality while sitting on the couch.
Letting your partner manage the entire mental load of the household.
Adams synthesizes this into a devastatingly simple principle. Whether you are a multi-billion-dollar corporation carefully managing a global PR crisis, or just an exhausted parent trying to raise decent human beings.
The fundamental danger is identical.
Performing goodness, the active maintenance of the facade that you are perfectly virtuous, morally pure, and always on the right side of history, actually consumes significantly more energy than simply practicing genuine humility.
It is harder to fake being perfect than it is to admit when you are wrong, apologize to your kids, and do the quiet, entirely unglamorous physical work of being a decent person.
That is a profoundly heavy critique of the entire concept of the digital signal.
It paints a picture where almost all online moralizing is either driven by individual neurosis, corporate greed, or parental hypocrisy.
But I want to introduce a massive pivot here. I want to genuinely play devil's advocate.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if virtue signaling is so inherently toxic, so universally corrosive, why are we all so totally, endlessly obsessed with calling it out? Is there a legitimate philosophical or perhaps even biological defense for this behavior?
This is where the intellectual landscape of our sources gets incredibly rich. We have to examine an essay by Kevin Hochmuth that executes a brilliant counterargument.
Completely inverting the critique we've just built.
Hochmuth argues that the very act of accusing someone of virtue signaling is, in and of itself, a highly sophisticated form of virtue signaling.
That is a total paradigm shift. Walk us through the mechanics of that meta-signal.
Think about the posture you adopt when you accuse someone else of faking their morals. You are engaging in high-level meta-commentary.
By calling out their performative post, you are actively signaling to your specific curated audience that you are with it.
You are demonstrating that you are highly authentic, deeply cynical, and far too intellectually savvy to be duped by someone else's cheap, fake empathy.
You are instantly claiming the intellectual high ground by tearing down their moral high ground.
The subtext of the accusation is, look at how smart and grounded I am, because I can see right through your pathetic performance.
Hochmuth goes deeper, arguing that this reflexive accusation is an offensive maneuver rooted in a deeply Machiavellian worldview.
Yes, when your default setting is to assume that any display of goodness is fake, you are operating on the baseline assumption that human beings are fundamentally deceitful.
Entirely self-interested and virtually incapable of genuine altruistic action.
It is a defensive posture born out of the modern terror of being played for a sucker.
In the internet age, we are so utterly terrified of being perceived as naive that we aggressively default to extreme preemptive cynicism.
And the research suggests that extreme cynicism might actually be scientifically misplaced, especially when we start looking at human behavior through the long lens of biology.
There is a fascinating piece by Robert J. King in Psychology Today that strips away the internet entirely and looks at moral signaling through evolutionary psychology.
King's work is essential because it removes the moral judgment from the behavior and treats it as a biological mechanism.
To understand this, let's use the classic evolutionary analogy, the peacock.
Oh, this is a great analogy.
When a peacock fans out those massive, heavy, incredibly vibrant, iridescent tail feathers, we don't look at the bird and get angry. We don't say, look at that obnoxious peacock virtue signaling his genetic fitness to the rest of the flock.
We understand the biology.
The feathers are a massive physical handicap. They make it harder to fly and easier for predators to spot him. The fact that he can survive despite carrying around that massive, glowing target proves to the peahen that he possesses superior genetics.
It's a costly signal of fitness.
So if we accept that animals must signal their fitness to survive, why do we suddenly expect human beings to be somehow above our own biology when we fan out our digital feathers online?
It is a profound comparison. Evolutionary psychology dictates that human beings, as hypersocial primates, are laser-guided toward moral signaling because it is the fundamental hardwired mechanism we use to build trust and navigate incredibly complex social contracts.
In the physical, ancestral world, genuine virtue like risking your own life to defend a stranger or sacrificing your limited winter food reserves to feed the sick members of the group is incredibly costly.
Because it is so dangerous and hard to fake, it serves as a highly reliable signal of trustworthiness. It proves you are a safe partner for cooperation.
So the intense irritation we feel when we see a pastel infographic or a black square isn't because the act of signaling itself is inherently evil?
No. The rage comes from the fact that the digital signal is too cheap.
The internet has broken the evolutionary math. It lowered the caloric and physical cost of the moral signal to absolute zero.
We get furious because our biology recognizes that the signal is incredibly easy to fake, making it an unreliable indicator of actual trustworthiness.
But, and this is King's absolute central thesis, the sudden proliferation of fake, cheap virtue on the internet does not invalidate the existence of real, hard-to-fake virtue in the physical world.
The existence of counterfeit money doesn't mean gold has no value.
King also dives into the deep underlying philosophical divide and how we actually calculate that value, contrasting the schools of deontology and utilitarianism.
I know you genuinely struggle with this divide.
Because on paper, one side seems so obviously correct, but in practice, it feels monstrous.
The divide between utilitarianism and deontology is the fault line of human morality. Utilitarianism is the philosophy of the spreadsheet.
It posits that actions should be judged purely and exclusively by their consequences, the pursuit of the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Utilitarian behavioral scientists and economists often view human morality as a cold, unemotional math problem.
This is the famous trolley problem.
Right. A runaway train is barreling down a track toward 5 tied-up people. You have the power to pull a lever, diverting the train onto a sidetrack where it will only kill one person.
The utilitarian looks at that and says, one death is mathematically preferable to 5. Pull the lever. Next question.
Or think about the agonizing early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, when certain economic models were attempting to run a literal cost-benefit analysis.
Weighing the acceptable number of human casualties against the percentage drop in the global GDP.
And when those utilitarian calculations are presented to the general public, the public reaction is almost universally one of visceral revulsion.
People recoil in absolute horror at the idea of treating human lives as fungible data points.
I feel that revulsion too. But objectively, mathematically, the utilitarians are technically right. Saving 5 lives is better than saving 1.
So why is our biology so violently hardwired to reject the math?
We reject the math because the human operating system runs on deontology.
Deontology, what does that actually mean?
Deontology is the deeply ingrained, often instinctual belief that certain actions, like actively choosing to sacrifice an innocent person or deliberately inflicting cruelty, are just inherently categorically wrong, completely, regardless of the mathematical outcome or the supposed greater good.
Utilitarians get incredibly frustrated by this. They view human beings as flawed, calculating machines.
They wish we would just get over our irrational, silly emotions, like our visceral disgust at cruelty, our paralyzing guilt, or our deep, illogical attachments to specific loved ones, so that society could make perfectly rational mathematical decisions.
But King's argument is that the utilitarians have it completely backward. Those silly emotions aren't a bug in the human software. They are the defining feature of the hardware.
The capacity to care about innocence, the physical nausea we feel when we witness cruelty, the absolute illogical prioritization of the people we love, that's literally what constructs our humanity.
If you successfully strip all of those deontological emotions away in order to execute perfect moral math, you are no longer describing a human being, you are describing a sociopath or an algorithm.
So what does this all mean?
Yeah, we've journeyed through the ego, the corporate hypocrisy, the biological necessity of the peacock's tail, and the philosophy of human emotion. Are we just doomed to this endless cycle of cheap digital signaling?
Are we supposed to just accept that all of our social media posts are inherently selfish, yet biologically necessary for our survival?
To find the resolution to that tension, we have to pivot away from the realm of philosophy and evolutionary theory and ground ourselves in hard, empirical, modern data.
Because when researchers actually track the physical outcomes of these digital signals, the data revealed something incredibly surprising and highly counterintuitive.
These cheap, seemingly performative digital signals actually do translate into tangible, real-world action.
This is, without a doubt, the most fascinating part of our entire stack of sources.
We have a remarkably robust, massive academic audit study from the Center for Economic and Policy Research, or CPR, that completely shatters the cynical Machiavellian view of Slacktivism.
We need to take our time and really dig into the methodology here, because the way they designed this trap is brilliant.
The scale of the study is what gives it its power. The researchers didn't just survey a few dozen college students, they analyzed the behavior of nearly 20,000 U.S. academics.
Tenured and non-tenured professors across a massive variety of universities.
So we are looking at a population that is highly educated, highly vocal, and deeply embedded in the cultural conversation.
Exactly. The researchers began by scraping the public Twitter feeds of all 20,000 professors.
Using advanced linguistic analysis, they separated these academics into two distinct cohorts.
The first group was categorized as vocal. These were professors who had explicitly and publicly tweeted in support of racial justice, using the hashtags, sharing the infographics, broadcasting the signals.
And the second group was categorized as silent. These were professors who were active on Twitter, they used the platform regularly, but they had never once tweeted about racial justice or inequality.
So we have cleanly separated our digital virtue signalers from our non-signalers.
Now, how do you test if the signal is real?
You run a real-world audit. The researchers sent out thousands of fake email requests to all 20,000 professors across both groups.
The emails were crafted to look exactly like a standard everyday request from a prospective graduate student, asking the professor for a brief 15-minute Zoom meeting to discuss potential graduate studies and seek mentorship.
The genius of the study is entirely in the subtle variations of the names and the background information used in those emails.
The researchers rigorously controlled the variables. They used distinctively black-sounding names and distinctively white-sounding names.
They also vary the names to be distinctively male or female.
And to test the bounds of class and systemic disadvantage. In exactly half of the emails, the fictional student explicitly mentioned in passing that they were a first-generation college student.
This setup is incredible. It allows the researchers to perfectly measure actual, offline, private discriminatory behavior across the intersections of race, gender, and class.
Because a professor deciding whether or not to give 15 minutes of their time to a student isn't a public performance, it's a private allocation of their actual valuable resources.
Now, before the researchers unblinded the final results, they did something very clever. They took the experimental design and presented it to a large group of current graduate students, asking them to predict the outcome.
And the graduate students were overwhelmingly, deeply cynical.
They assumed that the tweets were entirely vacuous. The consensus prediction was that both the vocal group and the silent group would discriminate against the black students equally.
They firmly believed that the professors tweeting about racial justice were just engaging in empty moral grandstanding, and that behind closed doors, their biases would be exactly the same as everyone else's.
But the data completely defied the cynicism. Let's look at the reveal.
The real-world, private behavior of these 20,000 professors directly and powerfully aligned with their public digital signaling.
Let's look at the silent professors first, the ones who used Twitter but never tweeted about justice. When they received an email from a student with a black-sounding name, they were 18% less likely to accept the meeting request compared to when they received the exact same email from a white-sounding name.
18%. A massive, measurable display of systemic bias. But what about the vocal group? The supposed virtue signalers?
The vocal professors, the ones accused of just performing for the internet, were actually 6% more likely to accept a meeting with a black student than a white student.
That completely flips the narrative. They were actively backing up their cheap digital tweets with the incredibly expensive currency of their own time and their professional gatekeeping access.
The data goes even further. The vocal professors also heavily favored female students and first-generation students in their meeting acceptance rates, actively seeking to distribute their mentorship to marginalized groups.
While the silent professors showed absolutely no such bias toward helping those disadvantaged groups.
The empirical conclusion of the study is undeniable. These virtue signals are not vacuous. The people who are loudly tweeting about justice are, statistically, the exact same people who are doing the quiet, unglamorous, offline work to support marginalized people when no one is watching.
That is such a vital piece of data to combat the exhaustion of the internet. But to be intellectually honest, we have to look at the one deeply fascinating caveat that the researchers discovered when they analyzed a different set of variables.
Political donations.
Yes, the researchers didn't stop at the emails. They cross-referenced these 20,000 professors with public campaign finance records.
They specifically focused their analysis on the incredibly tight 2021 Georgia Senate runoff election.
This election featured two candidates from the exact same political party, running in the exact same state, with virtually identical political platforms. Jon Ossoff, who is white, and Raphael Warnock, who is black.
It's the perfect control scenario to test hidden bias in financial behavior. What did the donor data show?
It revealed a very uncomfortable truth, but both the vocal group and the silent group of academics gave slightly less money to the black candidate, Warnock, compared to the white candidate, Ossoff.
That is mind-bending. So the public virtue signals align perfectly with their private workplace behaviors. They would gladly take a meeting to mentor a marginalized student, but the digital signal did not necessarily override deep-seated systemic racial bias when it came to the private allocation of cold, hard financial capital.
It perfectly illustrates the complexity of the human mind. Signaling is a tremendously strong, reliable predictor of visible interpersonal workplace equity.
But human bias is not a monolith. It remains deeply complex and stubbornly entrenched when it comes to private financial decisions.
Despite that caveat, the overwhelming takeaway from the CEPR audit is that the signal matters. And the Vicey article brings in another powerful sociological concept that proves the immense invisible power of the signal, even when it is performative.
It's called the availability cascade.
The availability cascade is a cognitive heuristic, a mental shortcut. It explains how human beings naturally conform their behavior based on their perception of shifting social norms, which they judge based on how readily available an idea is in the public consciousness.
The example Vicey uses involves vegetarianism, and the mechanics of it are brilliant. Studies demonstrate that if you approach a person and simply tell them, hey, 30% of the population are vegetarians, it doesn't really affect their behavior at all.
A static statistic doesn't trigger the survival instinct.
But if you change one word and tell them 30% of the population are currently becoming vegetarians, suddenly that person's brain registers a rapid cultural shift.
They calculate the velocity of the trend, not just the static number.
As a result, that person is twice as likely to order a meatless lunch that very same day. They physically alter their diet because their brain is terrified of being left behind by the evolving in-group.
That is the cascade effect in action. When millions of people see a massive wave of public support for a cause on their feeds, even if a significant portion of that digital support is shallow, performative slacktivism, the brain doesn't care.
It registers the sheer volume. That massive signal makes the moral stance highly available in the cultural consciousness.
It creates a very real, palpable wave of social pressure, and that perceived pressure forces genuine, physical, societal shifts in behavior.
The illusion of a massive movement eventually manifests the reality of a massive movement.
And we cannot talk about the sheer volume of that digital signal without talking about the demographic generating the loudest noise. There is a remarkably poignant piece from the Roosevelt News, a high school publication, that forcefully defends digital activism from the youth perspective.
The author points out a structural reality that adults, quite frankly, usually completely ignore.
Think about a 16-year-old high school student who is deeply passionate about climate change or gun control. By law, they literally cannot vote.
They do not have access to the disposable income required to make massive financial donations to political action committees. They cannot run for office.
They are entirely locked out of the traditional levers of democratic power. Their social media platform is, quite literally, their only lever of power.
Exactly. When adults sit back and smugly dismiss a teenager as a lazy slacktivist for posting an infographic on their Instagram story, it is a profound injustice.
Posting online is their primary and sometimes their exclusive tool to interact with, organize around, and influence global issues. They're using the only tools available to them to exert pressure and shape the culture they are inevitably going to inherit.
So if we take a breath and synthesize everything we've uncovered, we have established that the digital landscape is littered with traps.
It is heavily fueled by the Pharisee's ego, governed by the terror of the Camp C dilemma, and constantly manipulated by the hypocrisy of massive corporate entities.
Yet, simultaneously, we have proven through the CEPR data and the availability cascade that this chaotic digital ecosystem is full of immense potential. The visibility of the signal undeniably changes real-world behavior.
Which brings us to the ultimate practical question for you, the learner listening to this. How do you actually survive and navigate this glowing cityscape tomorrow?
How do we take all of this theory and move from the paralysis of performative signaling to the momentum of actionable allyship?
The sources provide a very clear roadmap for this, and the first step requires a shift in internal processing, courtesy of Catherine White's research at the UBC Sauder School of Business, detailed in the Vicey article.
The mechanism to defeat the trap of slacktivism is a psychological process she calls internalizing.
Internalizing, meaning the work you do before your thumb ever touches the screen, before you hit retweet, before you share the perfectly designed pastel infographic.
Yes. It is introducing deliberate friction into a frictionless system. Before you post, you must stop the dopamine loop and ask yourself why this specific issue genuinely matters to your own internal core values.
You have to actively ground the action in your internal moral compass, completely detaching it from the external desire for algorithmic applause.
White's research reveals a fascinating paradox. If you consciously tie your support to internal consistency, or better yet, if you deliberately keep your support private at first, like quietly researching a local organization and donating to them without ever mentioning it on your social media, you are statistically far more likely to engage deeply and meaningfully with that cause over the long term.
It's the oxygen mask principle on an airplane. You have to secure your own internal motives, ensure they are clean, before you attempt to project help outward.
And once your motives are secure, we have a fantastic, highly tactical guide on how to actually deploy your digital presence.
Natalie Willoughby, a student at the University of Puget Sound, created a remarkable zine titled The Social Media Activist's Handbook.
Willoughby's work is essential because it moves past theory and focuses heavily on the mechanics of intersectionality and the practical, ethical use of a platform.
It is an incredibly grounded, mature approach. She teaches users that sometimes the most potent form of actionable allyship is simply knowing how to step back.
It's the conscious decision to use your digital real estate, not to center your own voice or your own emotional reaction, but to explicitly amplify and direct traffic toward the marginalized creators and organizers who are already doing the heavy lifting.
Furthermore, she addresses the massive psychological hurdle we talked about earlier, the paralyzing fear of putting yourself out there and being checked by someone else.
She gives readers permission to overcome the terror of making a public mistake. She encourages people to post, to inevitably get it wrong sometimes, to accept the public correction with grace rather than defensive outrage, and to keep pushing for justice rather than freezing in terror of the mob.
And if we elevate this from individual tactics back to the systemic level, we return to the core philosophy of the Inclusion Nudges text.
The authors make a profound argument that the ultimate goal of all our digital discourse shouldn't be a society where we force individuals to constantly make courageous, explicit, emotionally exhausting public statements like, "I am a champion of gender parity."
Relying on that requires immense, constant individual willpower and bravery, and human willpower constantly fluctuates.
We can't build a sustainable society on the expectation that everyone will be a hero every single day.
So what is the alternative to relying on individual bravery?
The alternative is the deliberate architectural design of better systems. We need to create behavioral nudges, structural guardrails that automatically empower large groups of people to act inclusively without them having to consciously think about it, expend emotional energy, or risk their social standing.
Give me a tangible, physical example of a nudge in the real world.
The authors detail the use of speech bubbles in corporate or academic meeting rooms. This can be a physical token or a digital protocol designed to ensure that every single participant gets a designated, uninterrupted turn to speak.
The beauty of the system is that it actively and automatically prevents the loudest, most dominant voices in the room from silencing marginalized colleagues.
No one has to bravely stand up and demand to be heard. The system enforces the equity. Or consider the implementation of blind hiring processes, where software automatically strips names, genders, and graduation years from resumes before human resources ever sees them.
True actionable allyship means utilizing your time and energy to alter the physical environment and the underlying systems rather than just changing the bio on your Twitter profile and hoping people behave better.
Okay, to bring this massive journey all the way home, I want to synthesize a final, highly tangible checklist.
We pulled these specific action items from the Bowdoin Review, and they serve as the ultimate litmus test for the listener to ensure their activism remains actionable, not performative.
Point number 1. Do not just act as an automated megaphone. When you see an article or an infographic that perfectly confirms your pre-existing worldview, resist the urge to immediately retweet the headline. Force yourself to sit down and read the entire article, understand the historical context, wrestle with the nuance.
Point number 2, make your money aggressively match your morals. Look at your bank statements. Support businesses owned by people of color or marginalized groups directly in your physical community.
Point number 3, donate privately. Give your financial resources to the organizations doing the actual groundwork, and specifically train yourself to not require the exchange of public applause for your dollars.
Point number 4, Do the offline reading, read the heavy books, watch the dense documentaries, and most importantly, have the incredibly uncomfortable, messy conversations at your own dinner table with your own family where absolutely no one is recording you and there are no likes to be gained.
And finally, point number 5. Use the digital space purely as a launch pad, never as the finish line. Social media is the starting block for awareness. Your physical life, your physical community, is where the race is actually run.
That checklist is a phenomenal synthesis of our entire deep dive today. We have traversed an immense and incredibly complicated landscape.
We started by staring into the ego-driven dark side of Blackout Tuesday, diagnosing the psychological traps of moral licensing, the arms race of moral grandstanding, and the terrifying paralysis of the Camp C dilemma.
We expose the deep structural hypocrisy of corporate pride campaigns and the illusion of sustainability marketing. But then we shifted the lens.
We examined the biological, evolutionary necessity of the signaling peacock. We defended the profound deontology of our silly human emotions. And finally, we grounded our hope in the hard, empirical data of the CPR study.
Proving that vocal allies often do back up their words with action, and that our digital signals can and do create real physical cascades of societal change.
It is a massive amount of conceptual weight to process. And to you, the learner listening to this right now, we want to explicitly say this. It is completely fundamentally okay if you feel exhausted and overwhelmed by the constant pressure to post.
The architecture of the internet is deliberately designed to make you feel like you are never doing enough and never angry enough. But true, lasting virtue does not require a digital megaphone.
To borrow a concept from the philosopher Albert Camus via Kevin Hockmuth's brilliant essay, true virtue resides in the practice of Socratic modesty.
Socratic modesty is the incredibly difficult practice of being ruthlessly strict, demanding, and uncompromising with your own internal behavior, while simultaneously being deeply lenient, generous, and forgiving toward the failings of others.
It is the quiet willingness to embrace the messy, unglamorous, highly contradictory reality of being a flawed human being off camera.
Socratic modesty, being strict with yourself and generous with the world. I love that. And as we finally wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to chew on.
It is a reality we haven't even touched on yet, but is currently hurtling toward us at light speed.
As artificial intelligence algorithms become increasingly sophisticated, as they become capable of perfectly mimicking the cadence of human empathy, what happens to the digital ecosystem?
We are entering an era where an AI can auto-generate a flawless, beautifully designed, hyper-researched, pastel social justice infographic, specifically tailored to perfectly trigger the emotional engagement of your specific followers.
If a machine generates the outrage and you share it with a single tap, if there's absolutely zero human effort, zero time sacrificed, and zero emotional cost involved in the creation or the distribution of that post, does the virtue of the signal completely cease to exist?
Or does the algorithm itself, devoid of a soul or a conscience, just become the ultimate, perfectly optimized performative activist?
That is a chilling and absolutely necessary question for the next era of human communication.
Something to mull over the very next time you feel the urge to open your apps.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay fiercely curious, keep seeking the quiet truth hidden behind the algorithmic noise, and remember, the digital world may be a murky, chaotic, deeply flawed place, but the beautiful, messy reality of human behavior is something we still have the power to heal and change long after the screen goes dark.